Thank you, Mr. Todd. Our first panel is linked with business view on our today's topics. I want to invite Mr. Thor Fjaran. Mr. Thor is from Statoil. He's a chair of program committee of WPC, and he will moderate the first panel. Please. Mr. Mehmet Ogutsur, chairman of Global Resource Partnership UK and Bosphorus Energy Club. Mr. Srđan Bošnjaković, deputy CEO for strategy and investment, NIS Gazprom Serbia. Srđan, please. And Mr. Ali Rakhnishin, senior commercial analysis, BPC Iran. Please.
Sorry. Thank you very much for the kind invitation here to Belgrade. It's my first time in Serbia and it's my first time in Belgrade. I'm really impressed by the city, by the cocktail party last night, and by the setting here. And with the number of participants, this looks great. For this panel, I would like to give a very short introduction initially, and then leave the word to the panelists, the distinguished panelists. The world is experiencing a global shift with fairly dramatic political, economical, and industrial changes. Increase in population, and we experience volatile pricing that will have a long-term impact on our energy requirements and also on our entire sector. The demand both for conventional and unconventional oil and gas continues to rise, even though a little bit slowly just now, and it remains to be critical into the changing energy mix that we see, which includes a significant growth in renewable energy. Our industry needs to cooperate with all stakeholders, including government, the industry, academia, and not at least society, to build bridges to a sustainable energy future for all. Partnerships, technical innovations, and strong leadership will form the foundation, supported by global policies in key areas, in order to supply energy for our future. The theme for the 22nd Congress that will take place in Istanbul in about a year's time is Bridges to our Energy Future. And the Congress will hopefully provide a platform for an open dialogue with all stakeholders. And the Congress is very much about dialogue with all stakeholders in our industry. As mentioned by our President, the issues discussed and conclusions from this workshop will be presented and addressed in Istanbul, together with 7 other expert workshops taking place at this time. In this session, we will look into or at least try to look into the crystal ball, discussing global petroleum industry trends that we today believe relevant for the period 2030 to 2050. We are not always that good at predicting, but we'll try today. And I hope that we can create a panel debate with an active audience discussing those issues. So by that, I would like to say a few words about the panelists. It's a distinguished, professional, and diverse panel that we have here today, starting with Mehmet Ogutsur. I don't know if I always pronounce that name correctly.
That's not easy.
An internationally recognized authority within the energy, investment, finance, and geopolitics. He holds a number of board positions, and to mention a few, is the chairman of the Global Resources Partnership in UK. He's a special envoy to the Energy Charter in Brussels. He's an executive chairman of the Bosphorus Energy Club in Istanbul, and is a board member of General Energy London, and Sisicam Group in Istanbul. For our second panelist, Srdan Bošnjaković, graduated and postgraduate in mechanical engineering from University of Technical Sciences in Novi Sad. More than 20 years of experience in oil and gas industry. The former CEO of NIS Novi Sad is currently acting as Deputy CEO for Strategy and Investment in NIS Novi Sad. And then we have to find the last one. Ali Raneshin from Iran, which is sorry, might have left that one, but Ali is Iran's representative into the Young Professionals group in World Petroleum Council. Very active, so has a lot of work and interest into the energy sector and also into the carbon capture and storage area, which is very relevant for this discussion, and represent the next generation in this debate, which I think is very, very important when you talk in this perspective. As I said, I would like to start out with giving the panelists some few minutes to give their perspective, initial perspective of the topic. Then we'll turn to a moderated panel debate. I have a few questions prepared for them, but I expect the audience will have a lot of issues that they want to discuss. So there will be microphones around. When you're being asked to deliver a question, please tell who you are and where you come from, who you represent, and then we take it from there. So then let's start with Mr. Mehmet Uguçlu to give his introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank also the Serbian National Committee for bringing together these minds, as well as what we hope to see a very interactive, strong audience here. This meeting couldn't have come at a better time than today. Let's see. And because also it's very important to listen from the practitioners on the ground, what's happening in the petroleum industry. And since we will hear a lot about what's going to happen in oil industry today, in the course of today, I want to focus a little bit more on other fuels that we feel might be competing with our objectives, might pose some risks, as well as creating opportunities. And also, I would like to join the President in welcoming all of you, perhaps next year, almost a year from now, to Istanbul, when we will have the next WPC summit. What I would like to perhaps focus in the next 3 hours, if I may, I have 365 slides, is to focus on the game changers. This is a cliché word, perhaps. We use game changers for almost anything, but in the energy industry, we really go through some game changers which will affect our businesses, our future, our business decisions and policy choices. So we need to understand them better in order to place ourselves in the industry, as well as our national economies, the regions. First, we need to understand what are the salient features of game-changing developments in the energy industry. We talk in the past so much about resource scarcity, depletion of oil and gas reserves, peak oil, we heard all these stories. But now what we face is resource abundance. Wherever you turn, in oil, in gas, and also soon perhaps in renewables, there is a resource scarcity, resource abundance. And there are so many countries which have not yet entered into the marketplace. I mean, I was before working for British Gas. We developed the Santos Basin in Brazil, In Australia, we work on the new LNG projects. If they are completed, together with ExxonMobil and others, I mean, in Australia only, we will have almost 80 BCM of gas coming on stream by the end of this decade. That is almost half of what Russia exports to Europe. 80 BCM. Not even talking about Turkmenistan, which is the fourth largest reserve holder in the world, which has no access to the international markets. And East Mediterranean, we just have a discovery by ENI, Zorfield, Alexandria by BP, and Israel's Tamar, Leviathan, and I'm not talking about East Africa, West Africa, and Latin America. So there is so much resource in Arctic region, which contains almost a third of world's oil and gas reserves. So there is no problem about resources. Resources are there. The issue is how economical it will be to extract them and whether we will have the markets. And also, in our boardrooms, we are every day quite worried about the uncertainties. The number one uncertainty for us is the volatility in prices, from $148 coming down to $30, sometimes in a short space of time. So it makes it very difficult, not only for companies like us, but also for governments to budget, to predict, and make decisions. There's huge uncertainties. But this also had the beneficial impact for us because we had to apply very strict capital discipline. We have to improve efficiencies as a result. I'm always joking, we used to fly with corporate jets to our board meetings, staying in 7-star hotels. I say perhaps in the future, we have to fly EasyJet, trying to find the cheapest flight, and stay in student hostel, if it continues like that. But it has really had a very beneficial impact to bring down the cost significantly. And look at shale gas production in North America. They still survive. We thought that they will go bankrupt in light of the heavy indebtedness they have, and also crude oil increasing in other parts of the world. And we also have new players coming to the market, or former players coming and becoming more prominent, like Iran. If Iran reach the pre-sanction level of production and export levels, imagine what will happen. So Iraq is also, it has a potential to increase beyond 10 million barrels per day if there's stability in the country and the funds are flowing to Iraq, both in South as well as northern Iraq, KRG region. And also technology is quite interesting, technological innovation. We thought that, in our industry, we need long lead times, 15 years, 20 years, even 40 years production sharing agreements we have. But things are changing so fast. We cannot control. I mean, IEA in 1990s was where I used to work as well. We used to make projections about the renewables, just discarding it. It's not going to be even 2% of the world's energy consumption by 2035. But now when you look at the picture, the goals set for 2035s and 40s, now we have them today. And especially in renewables, and last year only, we had $280 billion of investment. Most of them relocated from oil and gas. Because of the uncertainties, investors are concerned about the future. So they look for other opportunities. So unexpectedly high levels of investment in renewables. Only in China, last year, we had almost 25 gigawatt of wind power and 22, I think, solar added to the capacity, while they were closing down coal mines. Not so much investment in oil and gas. So we have to understand these realities. Also, investments will be declining. Although everybody says there's abundance of money in the market, if there is a good project, of course it will flow there. But many big capital projects have been either postponed or cancelled. So, therefore, we have to operate in such an environment where uncertainties and speed of the changes are the name of the game. Although our president said that as much as uncertainties there are, but we also have new opportunities. Population is increasing, middle class is growing, and led by China, India, and perhaps Africa in the future, there will be huge demand coming. Perhaps as a result of the squeeze on the investment, there will be supply constraints in the next 10 years, 15 years. But by then, unfortunately, prices will never see again the levels that we became accustomed, like $148. So if it is around $70, I think we'll be happy for the next 2 years. Beyond that, again, who can predict? Even if you have the crystal ball, you know, we used to make projections in the IEA to 2035, 2040, but very few of them coming true, and nobody is questioning us because we will not be there in 2040. So also, I think the game is changing in the sense that IOCs are no longer as powerful as they used to be. And IOCs are growing. Seven sisters might be gradually replaced by seven brothers. You know, Rosneft, CNPCs, SOCAR, KMG, Petronas, Petrobras, they are becoming increasingly important and as competent as IOCs. The companies, if they don't adapt and change in the next 10 years, most of the companies that are big players today might be out of business. We also have to find very equitable and clever way of working together with NOCs. So new form of partnership between IOCs and NOCs so that we share the risks and benefits, upsides together. Geopolitics are becoming increasingly important, but not having so much impact on the oil prices. You know, if these geopolitical changes we saw in Syria, Russia, and in East Asia took place 10 years ago, the oil prices will be hitting the ceiling. Whereas now, there is very minimal impact because there is huge supply. There is caution there that can mitigate against that. But I think especially the strategic choke points like Strait of Hormuz, from which every day 17 million barrels of oil is flowing, and Malacca Strait, where East Asia is getting its bulk of crude, gas, as well as commodities, and 15 million barrels per day of crude oil. If there is any disruption in these choke points, we will be in big trouble. I can assure you that 5-6 days of disruption in Strait of Hormuz or Malacca Strait will push the prices up, whatever the market's demand and supply fundamentals are. So geopolitics, something that we have to watch very carefully. In terms of other fuels, let me quickly go this, yes. Natural gas, there was a discussion about whether we will have a golden age in natural gas. Yes, we are having it. Whether it's going to be sustainable in the current environment, and also abundance of players, and prices are coming down, and LNG as well as pipeline gas prices are converging, and probably by 2035, more or less, pipeline and LNG prices and volumes will be on the balance. And, but also climate change concerns that probably we'll discuss in greater detail will have a serious impact in favor of natural gas, which is, among all others, are the friendlier to climate change and environmental concerns. And shale gas, of course, is transforming the whole industry. And also, in Texas and North Dakota, oil men are dreaming that the crude and gas resources elsewhere will be shrinking while shale is increasing. Nuclear industry, we all thought that the nuclear renaissance is over after Fukushima. No, perhaps it's over in the western part of the hemisphere, But in the east, there's a huge explosion. As a matter of fact, now there are 60 nuclear power plants under construction going ahead in China, India, Korea, even in the Gulf countries where the oil and gas production are prominent. They are also heavily relying on nuclear. But whether these projects will be completed or not, whether they are just white elephants, we have to see. Because new technology coming on stream as well in nuclear, small nuclear powers, which will cost you less than $500 million, producing 200, 300 megawatts, rather than this $25 billion projects. Also, nuclear waste will be used as fuel, as part of a new project that Bill Gates is sponsoring. So there is a lot of change taking place in nuclear as well. The Russians and Chinese are also adapting from the nuclear submarines, the small reactors that can be used where the demand is. So we have to watch nuclear quite carefully. And the fourth industrial revolution that we talk a lot about in Davos will be fueled, they say, by renewables. So again, if we are to believe to projections, by 2035, almost two-thirds of the new power generation capacity will be fired by renewable fuels. And coal is no longer the king, although we know that we have to live with coal in the foreseeable future, because in China it's almost 80% of the power mix. It's not going to go away. So is in Poland. In US, in 2005, almost 10 years ago, the share of coal was almost 50% in power mix. It's now only a third, and it's declining further. And the four major US coal producers had a combined value of $34 billion in 2011, 5 years ago. As of yesterday, their value is $185 million. This might be an indication as well. In China, as I said, coal is still very important, so is in India and so many other developing countries. But overall, progressively, there will be less and less reliance on coal, as much as it can be done. I don't want to test our chairman's patience. Let me perhaps just list 4 key messages that I want to give. One is that, yes, the name of the game is speed of changes that we cannot predict. So whatever we say today, let's meet again 3 years later and see how well-founded and realistic they were. So we have to adapt and be agile all the time, both on the government side in terms of reforms, governance, but also on the part of companies. We have to be very fast and flexible in adapting to changing conditions. No worries about fossil fuels still being the mainstay of the energy, but I believe that progressively there will be shift to greener fuel, as we all know, but it's not going to be a revolution. It will be a progressive shift over time. And there is a euphoria about solar, Of course, potential we know what is in terms of especially solar energy, but making it commercially viable and applicable and integrating into the full energy system is not going to be easy. But with the technological advances, also storage facilities on the increase, this is going to change. So there will be a complementary process in which fossil fuels and greener fuels will be cohabitated, will be coexisting. So it will give us time to adapt ourselves to the changing realities. And also, I think the climate change, we always dismiss it. We pay lip service to climate change. We know how serious it is, but we fail often to factor it in our policy choices and business decisions. But it may not be so again, because things are changing. It's taken more and more seriously. So in every decision, in every step we take, I think we have to consider the implications from the point of view of climate change. And I will stop here. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opportunity for question and answer. And thank you. Sorry if I exceeded my time.
Thank you very much for a lot of interesting issues that we will discuss, for sure. Then, Mr. Bošnjaković.
Mr. President, board members, colleagues, the most frequent words here were uncertainty, volatility, very hard to predict, etc., etc., etc. And I personally like the most having a glance in the crystal ball. I'm dedicating this presentation just for a part of our sector, so it's just dedicated to crude. How do we see that the crude will be performing? Who will be the players in the market? What's going to be from supply side? What is going to be from the demand side? And how is going to be affecting the industry where we are working at the moment? So that there is uncertainty, that there is a lot of things which we passed in the last couple of years, that there are a lot of strengths which might be predicted, but some kind of a reaction of the biggest players, even in the most visible or transparent scenarios, are very hard to understand why they're happening and how long they will last. This presentation is backed up with a lot of materials taken from the leading worldwide consultants which are operating in the area of crude. So, in the okay, so have a look on the slide which is showing what will be happening according to our understanding and understanding from a global consultants in the area of demand and supply from the crude. Have a look on the slide about where is the big minus. So we're in the middle of it, 2016, and pay attention that this is graph year-to-year growth. So practically you can add those pylons year-to-year when you are going to analyze it. But we're in the middle of the minus, so the minus compared to the previous year is more than obvious, and all of the people who are dominant in the area are predicting that we're in the front of the period which will be having a sort of a stabilizing curve. Also pay attention to the yellow lines which are showing the American producers, and I will return back to them because we do believe that they are one of the key reasons for the late 2014 drop in the oil prices. In red circle is the period of according to our internal and external information, the period of where we can expect a sort of balance between crude and between supply and demand of the crude. So it's by 2025, but I think that the scenario will be keeping on by the 2040, which is the horizon which this presentation is showing by the end of the day. So we think that the global supply and demand curve will be on the level of 90 million of barrels per day. The already existing conventional base and base which is under exploration is dropping from 3 to 4% per year, and that a lot of companies are having projects which are in their portfolio either in sanctioned or unsanctioned phase, but with the projects which will be rolling. Segregated condensate and tight oil are yet to find, so you will see that in 2040 is more than 50% of the so-called conventional fields and conventional, which we're used to use at this stage. So this is global. This is, and I would like just to pay attention to the split between OPEC and non-OPEC countries. So you will see on the next slide the base, the segregated condensate, the sanctions which are already rolling, the unsanctioned which are in the portfolio ready to be launched, yet to find, and tight oil. So tight oil practically doesn't exist. But on the next slide, so you will see the portion of tight oil is quite significant. I will return back to the tight oil, and I will emphasize the role of the American, especially Northern American producers, giving a sort of a hint what they're doing and how they're trying to cope with the things which were happening, let's say, from the late 2014 by the early 2016. And then, so how they're performing and what they will be performing in the years to come. So this is once again year-to-year growth. Have a look their internal perspectives and their internal forecast, and segregated in the slide. So starting from 2016, they will start to recover and to add year-to-year growth regarding the tight oil. And how the tight oil will be influencing the global market, you will see in the next slides. So those are the slides I like the most. Where the crisis started, where those lines were intercepted in late 2014, how the US producers were forced to decrease a little bit of their production, but emphasizing a little bit from 9.2 to 8.9, so they're producing practically without any interruption even today. And in a slide below, you're seeing what is the percent of the crude which has been hedged, taking into the account the number of the companies, the percentage of the crude, and the level of the hedged price. So you will see that a lot of companies are not suffering from the prices which we're seeing on the market, because they were smart enough to in coordination with banks to put on the safe side their portfolio and their budget. That's why they're investing. It's a fact that in the last couple of years, industry was investing, I think, 10 times more than in previous 50 years, especially in the upstream. But starting from the majors and from their portfolio, the projects which are rolling, around of the 40% of the projects were either postponed, either completely delayed. But they're returning back, and they will be trying to fix that gap which is existing at the moment. What is happening in North America? So I've shown here the four biggest, let's call it reservoirs, or the area where the production of tight oil is underway. So Bacon, Eagle Ford, Permian, and let's say Niobrara. So the most intensive areas where the producers are acting, and on the upper right slide you will see that May 2015, 2016, you will not find any kind of huge crucial difference. So it's just showing their aiming to produce and to influence the market in the world. So those next couple of slides is just as an example of what they are doing at the moment. On the right-hand slide, you will see the rig count. The rig count is dramatically going down, but the efficiency and the effectiveness of the rig goes dramatically up. So making a long story short, they are choosing the better candidates. They are using the better technologies, and things which they are getting under the ground per one rig goes up. So you will see, just try to remember the curve on the right-hand side, and you will see pretty much the same things in all the region in the northern United States. If you add that kind of geological, technological approach, you can have a look on what they are doing from the point of view of technological solution, very intensive fracking approach, very intensive drilling from one pad, different wells, so minimizing the capex, increasing the efficiency, and increasing the effectiveness of the whole process of drilling. One just remark about the recovery of that kind of relation towards the tight oil is that, for example, former Goldman Sachs announced that he's ready to invest around $2 billion in this year in how they stated vulnerable oil and gas sector in the United States. So if they're ready to invest, in that case, all of us, we can find some kind of conclusions for us that it makes sense to follow their intentions. One more just to have a look where is going to be the tight. This is the orange on the top of the things. So we think it's going to be a sort of swing producer which will be affecting the market. Just trying to return back to you to the November and December 2014, where American producers did not want to stop their production and created a surplus from supply side compared to the OPEC countries and non-OPEC countries. Globally, where are we now at the moment? We're having a production around a little bit more than 80 billion of barrels per day, conventionals are going down, total new capacity is supposed to be a little bit more, and the total production is, as if you remember from the previous slides, is going to be of around 90 million of barrels per day. And the stress on the market, just returning back to the late 2014, which is the most interesting part, 2 to 3 million of barrels addition gave a sharp reaction of the market. So 92, 93 went down to from 108, 110 to the $30 or $35 per barrel. So how sensitive and how market can be completely unpredictable. So from the worldwide, who will be contributing in additional millions of barrels per day from new discoveries is shown on this slide. You will see that the Middle East and the Africa are the region which are expected to give the biggest contribution. So Europe, outside North America, two-deal pricing, especially interesting the slide on the lower left side. So you will see prediction of 2P reserves and the amount of the value traded in 2015 and per region, and the projection per, so from 12 or 11 down to Europe to even below $2 per barrel, 2P reserves. So what kind of crude will we be getting from the market? It's obvious it's going to be towards the heavy sour fuel, to medium sweet and medium sour. The light fuels will be going to minus. So it's somehow connected with the refineries, with their construction, with their possibility to convert and to process the heavier and heavier crude, which is most likely going to be present on the market. Okay, so on the next slide is a little bit about crude, how it's traded. On the lower part of the slide, you will see the curves, and you will see the rolling curves of the forwards. So the forwards are, let's say, from 3 to 4, maximum 5 months, depending on the moment where the contract price has been set. And if you see the volatility, from one side, the main red curve, but you will see also the lifespan of the curves. So it's easy to make some kind of a conclusion that 3 to 4 months is a period which can be predicted more or less with a safe side. And general conclusion we made not for the world, but for the company our own. We're working that at the moment we're not going to emphasize our strategy based on micro scenarios, trying to figure out what's going to be the oil price of the oil, how volatility is going to influence. But we thought, and we put in our strategy, that we think it is most important to make the company flexible, to make the management to understand that acceleration and resolutions are the things which are the most important at the moment, and of course the accent on the operational efficiency and operational effectiveness are the most important things in a days to come, from the short perspective down to the long-term perspective. So very short, dedicated to crude oil. If you had any question, I will be glad to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much for some very important introductory remarks. Then Mr. Rajin. And Mr. Ali Rajin, I didn't present him that well. So he has a long experience within petrochemicals in Iran. So that's your main area, I think.
Yes. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have a short presentation about Iran Petroleum, but in business point of view. Okay. In a cost breakdown structure for oil industry development, a plant in Iran. We have more items in upstream, downstream. As you saw in this slide, we have around $500 million in upstream and downstream projects in difference between oil and gas projects and plus the petrochemical plants. So this is our horizon up to 2020. In the based on budget, in oil refinery we spent $2 billion, and in gas refinery 20, petrochemical plants 15, and the total 37. And we should consider in remaining budget in the oil refinery as 32, gas refinery 44, petrochemical 35, and total 111. So we should focus on the rest of this budget for oil, gas, and petrochemical plants. This is the case only for one refinery for cost of breakdown for building a refinery. As you see that we have around 60% focus on the procurement. So this area is so much important for our side for investment on that than the other area that's mentioned in this slide. This is the sample of the procurement in oil, gas, and petrochemical plants in our area. Therefore, this slide is short presentation about our situation based on the investment. And you're welcome to join us in project of Iran in oil, gas, and petrochemical companies plant. For your more information about the invest in our projects in oil, gas, and petrochemical plant, you can contact us, and we will inform you and contact you with the top level of Iran Petroleum Ministry for more cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all three panelists. So let's dive into the dialogue. I expect that we started out 15 minutes late, so we have 15 minutes more time slot for us. Let's start with climate change. We have which is a very important issue framing our business in the future. We have the COP21 in Paris behind us. We have now several governments putting forward fairly tough targets for this time period we are talking about. What will this mean to us? Will we be able to adapt as an industry, and how will we adapt? Somebody want to start? Ahmed?
I can say a couple of words, and I think there is a general perception problem about our industry, because if you talk to NGOs active in climate change issues, they think that we don't realize the importance of climate change. We also develop theories which belittle or belie some of the scientific evidence. So there's an image problem there. And therefore, now climate change becoming a reality, and the businesses, the governments, international organizations are working on it quite extensively. I think there is a need for a significant mindset change on our side. So rather than paying lip service to climate change issues, if it will be factored into our decision makings, our markets, people's perceptions, I think we need to be more proactive in developing new thinkings, new approaches, and also the technologies that are climate friendly should be on the top of our priorities. So compared to other sectors, I think coal is worse in this regard. We are in a better of position, but we need to be probably more proactive and assertive in making sure that this perception, right or wrong, about our industry paying only lip service is no longer the case. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think this is something that individual companies cannot do much. There is a need for a collective effort. I think World Petroleum Congress in this regard plays an important role as a industry group to change the perception and adapt to the new circumstances and technologies.
Just to follow up briefly on that, there is a discussion about the cost of carbon, and there are different angles into that. How do you see that? Will that be a measure that will make something happen?
I think some of the measures that we have implemented over the past 2 decades, some of them I work on as well, like AIG, activities implemented jointly, and clean development mechanism. Most of them stayed more or less academic. So there wasn't any significant impact. And carbon capture technologies, carbon capture and storage technologies were too expensive, especially in this low price environment. The companies and governments are not willing to go the extra mile for making this happen. But I think, again, I'm more progressive. I'm more for progressive approach rather than big bang solutions, which will not come in this area. And I think we have to work more on carbon capture and storage technologies to keep the cost down as much as we can, and develop that. But also, as I mentioned, the improved efficiencies in our industry will help a great deal, rather than big major decisions. And by improving efficiencies in our rigs, in our processes, I think we'll be able to bring the carbon quite down. And in the air industry, air transportation industry, where the jet fuels are causing great problem in terms of carbon prints, I think there is a need to do more. But as I understand, because even the solar technology now getting into the aircrafts, there's you might have seen in the FT, this aircraft flying around the world non-stop 65 hours, whether it might replace some of the traditional fuels. I understand from the experts that this is not going to happen because jet fuel is very special. Therefore, there is a room for improving efficiency of the fuel and reducing the carbon print significantly. So it requires an all-out effort. I don't think that, as I want to underline again, companies alone or governments alone can cope with this. It requires collective effort.
The young generation, you and you, Ali Ranshin, have some expertise into CCS. Your view? Come a bit closer to the mic. And it should be lighting red, I think, when you...
Oh, sorry.
Okay, yes. As we know, one of the important point in climate change is environmental issue that came from the industry. So we have the number of CO2 emission in the industry, especially in refinery and petrochemical companies. For example, in our area, we had in sanction situation. So what we can do for solve this kind of problem? Let me inform you one of the case studies in our area in special energy special zone of Iran, in south of Iran. We had a number of NOx and SO2 in the pollution. spreading the pollution. So we had a problem for transfer the technology and equipments for carbon capture and something like this. But our young expert in the petrol refinery and refineries work on these projects with our equipments and our knowledge and our experience for solve this kind of problem, for remove the number of air pollution from the industry in the environments. And we was successful to gain decrease the amount of CO2 emission in the environment, and based on the saving the money, we had money for use this kind of method and CO2 capture, and use the amount of energy in our plant, for example, as the feed of our heater in refineries and petrochemical plant. And maybe use for the other section of our plant. So in this case study, our young generation in process area of petrol refineries and refineries help each other for solve this kind of problem.
Could you have your, yeah, please.
From the company's point of view.
Yeah.
I think that energy efficiency and effectiveness in the project realization are the crucial thing when we're speaking about the climate changes, we're speaking about air pollution, when we're speaking about the CO2 emission. And I would like to make a split on the share between European refineries, European producers, and the other part of the world. I think that Europe can fight and can cope with those issues. And that Europe is doing, all the refineries are more or less in line. And an example of that statement is very visible on the market. Just for example, so the CO2 certificates were traded last couple of years for $11, $10, $10.5 per ton. Now CO2 certificates are traded below €5 per ton. So it shows that a lot of infrastructure is already in line with the standards, that things are moving, that things are all right. There is no any kind of huge necessity for that kind of certificates. And if that trend is going to be continued, I think that at least part of the Europe is fine with those issues. Of course, standards, regulations, even in Serbia, we're putting a lot of standards and a lot of new procedures regarding the compound of the NO2, CO2, either in natural gas, either in the final products. So things are, at least from this perspective, are quite fine.
I'll just add one additional point. Yes, we focus so much on climate change, CO2 emissions, whatever, but these are bigger issues. There are some smaller and close to the people issues, like the oil spills that the oil industry caused in Gulf of Mexico case. There are so many others that we don't even know, that are not coming to the attention of the public. And also local pollution problems that our industry causes. So if you focus on them, tackle them before going to bigger issues on which our control is limited, and also overcapacity in infrastructure. I mean, look at Spain in LNG. So they are using only 30% of the capacity. And there's huge overcapacity in Europe for pipelines. Some of them are used again 30, 40% at capacity, and there is no need for building new infrastructures, for example. So these are quite helpful as well in terms of reducing not only carbon print, but the local environmental problems, which are very close to the heart of people that we work with. So my approach will be, rather than focusing on one area and trying to address it, I think we have to start from areas where we can really make a difference. This is in our control. And then move to carbon emission and other areas. I wanted to bring this.
As we should follow up the regulation for climate change. For example, in our area, we work on the project on zero flaring. So we work actively on these kind of projects in refineries and petrochemical. So you're welcome to join us transfer the technology and something like this for zero flaring to Iran.
Following up that in a little bit different direction, even though that we're communicating, we are doing a lot, we don't have much trust amongst the public opinion. This industry is seen as dirty, not attractive for students. At these days, not attractive for investors as well, but that's the different issue. There is a lot of young people in the audience, and having polls, we get a lot of feedback that we have to, in a way, to change our attitude. You're touching that a little bit. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? The public perception of this industry, and what can we do to change that?
Yes, I mean, the public perception also leads to loss of talent in our industry. If the young people are not convinced, are not inspired by our actions and the business operations, they don't come to this industry. And we are going to have a serious shortfall of talent in our industry. Already we are facing it. The current generation of engineers will be retiring soon, and we don't have the new generation of engineers coming in. Of course, technology will also shape up how we are going to work, but in order to attract the real talent to our industry, I think this is one of the issues, because young generation, I don't know what you call it, Y, Z generation, whatever, even we don't know that, and they are very keen on environmental issues, integrity, compliance issues. Therefore, also, we often use a lot of PR activities to show a nice face. You can do it to a certain extent, but in order to change the perceptions, I think real actions, real steps are needed. And therefore, we need to get perhaps the new generational leaders involved more and more. That's what World Petroleum Congress is doing. I don't think it's without any reason, because we want to get their feedback, how they feel, how we can improve our activities. Also, it requires a collective effort of engineers, the PR people, corporate affairs responsibilities, innovators in technology, finances. All of us need to work together to create such an impression, but not a false impression or artificial perception to change, because people will not accept that at the end of the day. This is also related to our survival, because if we don't make this step forward, step change, I think our life will be quite limited in the existing market. Look at other industries as well. Kodak in film, photo industry disappeared because they haven't adapted to the changes that were taking place. And in our industry, as I said in my speech, if we don't adapt and respond to the aspirations and also priorities of the people, next 10 years, we might be out of business, even the most successful appearing companies.
Comments from the rest of the panel?
It's a very interesting topic. So, do we suffering from the lack of competent people from the export point of view? Yes, we do. Whether is the reason that we are so-called a dirty industry, I'm not sure. Most likely is connected with a global approach throughout it. Education, sort of a social awareness, sort of awareness of the business, and the things which are more or less connected with the industry. All of the companies in the area and in the oil and gas market would like to have the competent, stable, already educated people, and not a lot of out of them are ready to invest in those people. And that is also a little bit of a problem. No infrastructure which is following the education and the needs of the companies which are here in the market. And that is from one side, and from the second side, so a little bit more awareness of the young generations about the things which are happening, whether we are dirty or not, and is it just a historical shadow from the past or not.
In my idea, I think that the policymaker should nominate students from the university, the top students, and nominate the young professional in the industry, and mix both of them, because we need the academic background and we need the experience. Mix of them will be good output for us. As we know, the academic students don't have any more experience for the industry as a professional man, and the professional and in the industry don't have they don't update about the academic issue. So in my idea, both of them should be mixed and cooperate with each other for solve the problem of the industry, and the policymakers should trust on them and take the responsibility to the young generation.
Thank you to all three of you. Change to a completely different topic. At present, we are experiencing low oil and gas prices. This is a crystal ball kind of question. How do we see the future? How will the oil and gas prices develop, and what are the drivers behind it? We are also struggling with a high cost level, which is now coming down because we have to, and there are some new ways of doing things as well. Will we avoid another cost spiral that we have seen before, when we had low oil prices and investment starts booming again? Or will we be able to keep it on a low level? Please.
I think that I addressed that issue in let's say, my presentation. So, especially from the point of supply and demand curves, we think that we will, in the next couple of years, not later than 2020, will have a sort of a stabilization curve, which will be going up. Remember that we had a global forecast that this year will be on average of around $40 per barrel per Brent. Now we're having already that we will be under 50 as an average for 2016. Now the latest forecasts are going towards to 60, 62, 63, up to 65. And taking into account all the rumors, taking into account all the what is happening in the region and the market, so especially in the M&A activities, you will find a lot of non-oil and gas sector players who are heavily acquiring the reserves, and especially from a financial point of view. If we consider that as rumors, or if we do not consider it as rumors, if we are taking that a little bit on a more serious point of view, so we're having all the signs that the prices of oil and gas are recovering, primarily the oil, and depending on the contracting issues, but the gas as well. So how long is it going to take? We think by 2021 we will be at the level where we've been in mid-2014, more or less. So yes, we are facing also the fact that European downstream was, and not only downstream, but the other things, other industry who are connecting with oil and gas were benefiting from the low oil prices. But taking into account the sort of a cohabitation between OPEC, non-OPEC, and the U.S. producers, and the availability of the products, once again, we believe internally that we will be stabilizing from the point of view of wellness of oil and gas sector.
I think that's the tricky question. I mean, the prices of oil, 2-3 years ago, would you be imagining where we are today? Again, it will be speculation. And one, I think, critical factor is that computing fuels are going to have a significant impact on oil prices, because oil is used mainly in transportation sectors. Now, with the rise of shale gas and gasification of economies, there will be also extensive use of gas in transportation as a fuel, including in the aircrafts and also train locomotives, not only in cars. And secondly, solar also is going to become quite widespread, not right now, but in the coming future. Therefore, the usage of oil in transportation sector may not be as strong as it used to be in the past. But of course, we know oil has other applications in pharmaceutical, in plastics, chemicals, and other manufacturing areas as well. And demand-wise, I mean, we rely so much on China. We thought that China will be importing about 12, 13 million barrels per day of crude oil by 2030. And, but the demand there is decreasing. There is a demand destruction. This will go up again in the future. And they are also increasing fuel efficiency, car fuel efficiency, significantly, even better than Germany in certain car types. And therefore, demand will not be as strong as we thought. The only scenario in which oil prices might go up progressively is the supply constraints that we will face, supply crunch, because we are not investing now in oil and gas. As I said, we stopped or postponed, cancelled most of the huge investments. And there will be need if the population is increasing and demand will also go up, as we expect in the next decade or so. And with the current level of investment, we won't be able to sustain it. Therefore, right now, our approach is more focused on cheap extraction locations. I mean, one of the companies I sit on the board, we invest heavily in Kurdistan region of Iraq, and the cost of extraction is about $2. So we can survive anyway there. But if you invest in deep sea offshore, you can't survive with these prices. All the shale companies now in the US are under red, as I said, in red. So they are producing at a loss. And it will not be sustainable. No matter how hard you try to bring the cost down, it will not affect that. Therefore, I think we have to become accustomed to the current low price environment, going slowly up. And if we reach $50 to $70 band over the next 4 years, I think this is basically what we have to deal with. If this is the situation, then you have to bring the cost drastically down and improve efficiencies as much as possible and find other areas where oil could be used, not only in transportation.
Iran is back again in producing and increasing its production. How do you look upon this?
I think so. I'm not in the position that's talking about. I think so. I'm not in the position that's talking about the increased number of oil and export the oil, but the policymakers are trying to do the increase the amount of oil and export the oil. But let me say that's I'm agree with you for the keep in the low level for the oil, but in the other side we should focus on the alternative energy, green energy, and the renewable energy.
Thank you. I would like to open for a question from the audience. Are there any immediate questions? Please. Please state your name and where you come from.
Yes, Ana Turbovic. I teach at the business school here in Belgrade called FEFA, Faculty of Economics, Finance, Administration. And I'm just wondering what you're doing to prepare for a world without fossil fuels, because a number of countries are now thinking about banning cars that use fossil fuels, especially in the more developed European countries. So just curious what steps you're taking when the business model disappears, if you think it might disappear.
Thank you for that question. I'm coming from one of those countries that's banning it. So please, panel.
Well, here, I think one size doesn't fit all, because certain countries might develop certain energy models. Look at Germany, Energiewende, if I pronounce it right. And you cannot implement this model in other countries, because Germany, being Germany, it has its own special circumstances and heavy subsidies on the part of the local authorities, but the public also is quite willing to do this. But if we try to implement it across European Union member countries, this will not work. And look at Portugal, Spain, or Bulgaria, quite different country mix. Again, China is a very special case. And as I mentioned, of course, There are new fuels and technologies that will make our extensive use of fossil fuels in transportation redundant or less needed, but still in the foreseeable future, it's not easy to change the whole fleet in a short space of time. It will be a progressive process. But I think here we have to also rely on the special circumstances of each country. Look at Morocco, for example, which will be hosting the next COP meeting in Marrakesh, and they are becoming the solar superpower because they have the solar, they have the infrastructure and the market available for this. But you can't have it in Norway, I guess. Would you?
Yes, we have hydropower, so we are...
Solar.
No, not solar. Just a comment to that. It's in a way, it's also, this comes at a cost. And in many respects, there will be a lot of subsidies into making this happen. And we see that already today. So that's a question to the society and to the politicians. How are they spending their money in a wise way? Any other comments from the panel? Please, another question.
Good morning, everybody. Marat Mikhailovich Tarterov. I'm moderating the next panel, and I'm with the Energy Charter Secretariat in Brussels. I have a very specific question for Srijan Boznakovic, and I really appreciate your presentation, but two slides or two aspects. One, you had that slide where you said that shale production in the US will continue to pick up after this initial Saudi shock in terms of low oil pricing. And you had that other slide with the rigs, less rigs, but more efficiency. I think that's very interesting. But I'd just like to ask you, how is that actually going to impact on the actual production volumes in the US? I think the US is producing, what, around 8 million barrels per day, roughly, something like that. I can't remember exactly. But how is that going to impact on production volumes? Also on the demand side, and this is, of course, not easy to answer, I think, but the overall impact of the shale revolution is that the US is importing much less oil, and this is actually having a major knock-on effect onto the market, downward trend in prices. US is importing much less oil. Do those two snapshot slides allude that US oil imports will actually decrease further and that domestic production will expand? There's also the wild card in this, but the oil export ban has been lifted. So, we may see the US at some stage also as an oil exporter, perhaps more to, the regional states. Thank you.
Okay, so quite a complex question, but I will try to squeeze that in a couple of sentences. So, from our point of view, the market of crude oil is very fragile. Being fragile means that +2, +3 millions of barrels can make a dramatic change. This is one part of the story. When we were witnessing in 2014 what was happening. Even less than 2 million tons were creating a huge uncertainty into the market. This is one part of the story. So the second part of the story is that the technology and the techniques that they're using in shale oil and in tight oil in northern states are at the level which cannot be compared to the level a couple of years ago. So this is also a fact. I've just tried to show you what kind of technological approaches they're using. They're using one pad for a couple of drilling rigs. They're using very special technologies for choosing an adequate modeling system, and the multiple fracking, which is not used as far as I know in the other areas of oil and gas sector. So all those things are giving them additional flexibility and ability to work, ability to work under pressure. So they can easily go up and down. And that forecast, which is telling that year-to-year growth is going to be very stable, which is directly connected with those figures which were shown here. So yes, the ban does not exist anymore. They can export. In the same side, they will be following with the refineries. We do expect from the downstream point of view that they will be lacking the gasoline, so the gasoline will be most likely moving from either European, either Caspian region. So those things will be, and of course the cost of logistics will be determining the future, but they will be playing a significant role, that is definite.
Are there more questions from the audience? I think we have room for one more within the time frame. Maybe I can, other one? I can see, no, I don't think so. Just one final question to the panel. You talked about the roles of the NOCs versus the IOCs. What kind of oil companies or energy companies do we see in this perspective of 2050? What do they look like?
Well, I think if I knew, I would be working for McKinsey and selling this to you, at Statoil and others. But we can see some of the early signals, perhaps. One that is, because our companies, Statoil, BP, Shell, and ExxonMobil, we are like aggregators. We use lots of subcontractors, and we use the financing instruments of others, technologies of others, and bring them together. So this is a more aggregator role. And increasingly, NOCs are doing this as well. Their plus is that they also control more than 90% of the world's reserves. And so they are the reserve holders. And they want to have better returns from their reserves. And they have also new generational leaders who understand the industry very well and can easily work in IOCs as well. And therefore, the future petroleum companies, it will not make much sense which nationality they are from. If this is a global industry, so long as you can effectively bring together the technical, financial, managerial expertise and a very good management, you could do it anywhere else. And also, if we are going to move gradually, or progressively, I should say, perhaps it's not going to be gradual, into greener economy and greener fuels, I think we have to adapt it. And now we already see Shell and others have created their own clean fuel divisions. It's not going to pay only lip service to these industries as we did in the past, but they will increasingly become the major part of it. It happened already in the gas, because most of the IOCs now have a stronger gas production units than before. I see that also they will be working through the wide spectrum of fuels, and their share in their business will change according to the circumstances, and perhaps renewable will be more important. So Statoil will be a key renewable company perhaps in the next 15 years, while Shenhua in China will be focusing not only on coal, but they will also be working perhaps on nuclear and hydro at the same time. So the traditional roles will be redefined as far as I can see. Just one word about the cost of the production of the shale gas producers in the U.S. in response to what Marat said. In the past, as soon as we get the price signal that the price is going to go up or down, then we increase the investment and increase the volume of production. This will take normally 2-3 years from the moment you detect the price signal. But now it's faster, even from $30 to $40, $50 now. And we see that shale producers in the US started to increase production because they are very adaptable, flexible. They are small and medium-sized operators. Not the big ones didn't succeed in the US. So small is beautiful because they are adaptable. They move faster.
I think we have spent the time where we I added 15 minutes because we were 15 minutes late, so we spent all that time. I thank the panel a lot for sharing expertise, experience, and views on a variety of issues, which I think will be relevant and are relevant for the future of energy mix in the time span we're talking about, 2030 to 2050. Thank you very much.
Thank you.